What would you do if a starving little girl returned your lost wallet, and inside it was a note so heartbreaking it shattered everything you thought you knew about kindness? That's exactly what happened to Ethan Ward, a 33-year-old billionaire who owned half the skyline of Boston but couldn't remember the last time he felt alive. He had all the money in the world, yet one crumpled piece of paper from a child he'd never met would bring him to his knees. Stay with this story, because what began as a simple act of honesty will turn into something no one saw coming. Ethan Ward woke before dawn as he always did in his Beacon Hill penthouse that floated above the sleeping city. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the skyline like a painting, cold, flawless, and utterly lifeless. His mornings were a ritual of control, black coffee, measured to the gram, a silent treadmill run facing the Charles River, a brief scan of the market reports that told him how many millions his algorithms had made while he slept. To the world, Ethan was a miracle of modern capitalism, the genius who turned an app into an empire. But to himself he was just noise and numbers. "Good morning, Mr. Ward," came the voice of his home assistant. "Your driver will arrive in 10 minutes. Breakfast is ready." He didn't respond. The table for 12 stood empty except for his untouched meal. The silence of success was deafening. Later that morning, while his company's board argued over projections he no longer cared about, Ethan stared out the window of the meeting room, wondering how something so full of light could still feel so gray. He left early, ignoring the confused stares of executives who would later whisper that their boss was off. Maybe he was. All he knew was that for the first time in years, he didn't want another deal, he wanted air. He walked without purpose through Boston's narrow streets, his tailored suit out of place, among the smell of roasted chestnuts and old brick. On the corner of Myrtle Street, a small bakery caught his eye. Its windows were fogged, its sign faded, "Hale's Bread and Coffee." Since 1954. Inside, the air was warm and real. The man behind the counter, gray-haired and dusted with flour, smiled as if greeting an old friend. "First time here," son Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I guess I just wanted something normal." "Then you came to the right place," the baker said, handing him a mug of coffee so strong it almost burned. It was the best thing Ethan had tasted in years. No PR cameras, no investors, just the hum of life. For 10 quiet minutes, he felt human. He left cash on the counter, thanked the man, and walked out into the crisp evening air. He didn't notice that his black leather wallet, stuffed with cards, IDs, and at least $3,000 had slipped from his pocket onto the wet sidewalk. Hours later, as the city lights shimmered in puddles, a little girl named Ella Grace spotted the wallet near the bakery door. She was 7, her coat too thin for the October wind. Her brother Sam, 5, clung to her hand, his lips blue from cold. "Maybe there's food money," he whispered. Ella opened the wallet with trembling fingers. The bills inside could feed them for months. She stared at them, at Sam's hollow eyes, and then shook her head. "It's not ours, but hunger has a voice louder than conscience." After a long silence, she pulled out one bill at 20 and tucked it in her pocket. She found a scrap of notebook paper and wrote in shaky letters, "I'm sorry. My brother was hungry. I took one bill to buy bread. I promise I'll pay you back someday." She placed the note on top of the money, closed the wallet, and pressed it against her chest, as if it were a secret too heavy to hold. The next morning, Mr. Hale found the wallet on the doorstep, and moments later saw a familiar pair of children enter his shop. Ella handed him the wallet and the 20 she had used for bread. "It belongs to someone named Ethan Ward," she said softly. "Please give it back if he comes." Her voice cracked, but her eyes didn't flinch. The baker watched as she pushed the money toward him. "I want to pay for the bread," she added. "That way, I don't owe anyone." Mr. Hale took the bill, his throat tight. "You're a good girl, Ella," he whispered, but she was already walking away, clutching her brother's hand. When Ethan woke that morning, the world was the same until he realized his wallet was missing. He retraced his steps, irritation rising until he reached the bakery. Mr. Hale smiled when he saw him. "I think this belongs to you," he said, handing over the wallet. Ethan opened it, expecting the usual relief of recovered property, but instead he found the note. The handwriting was uneven, the paper smudged, but every word struck him like a hammer. "I'm sorry. My brother was hungry. I took one bill to buy bread. I promise I'll pay you back someday." He read it once, twice, a third time. The room blurred. For the first time in years, tears filled his eyes, not the kind born of loss but of revelation. A child who had nothing had chosen honesty over survival. And he, a man who had everything, had never once done something purely good without expecting something in return. Ethan stood there for a long moment, the note trembling in his hands, until Mr. Hale spoke gently. "They come by sometimes," he said. "The little one's sick. They sleep somewhere on the east side." Ethan nodded, unable to speak. He tucked the note back into his wallet as if it were the most valuable thing he owned. "If they come back," he said, finally, his voice breaking, "tell them I'm looking for them. Not to take anything from them, but to thank them." And with that, the billionaire who thought he'd seen everything stepped out into the cold streets of Boston, chasing a promise written in a child's hand, without knowing that this search would change all three of their lives forever. The next morning, Boston woke beneath a pale winter sun. But for Ethan Ward, the city looked different, stripped of its polish, raw and human. The note still burned in his pocket, every word echoing louder than the morning news or the endless calls from his office. He had built companies on algorithms that tracked millions of data points, but now the only thing that mattered was finding one little girl with a paper heart and the courage to write it. He started at the bakery. Mr. Hale, wiping flour from his hands, shook his head. "They came early yesterday," he said. "The girl bought bread, paid full price. Haven't seen them since." Ethan left his card, offering a reward if the children returned. But it didn't feel right. This wasn't about money. It was about something deeper, something his fortune had never been able to buy meaning. For the first time in years, he canceled his meetings. His assistant, confused and anxious, warned him about investor calls and media appearances. "Tell them I'm unavailable," he said simply. When she asked for how long, he replied, "Until I find them." He walked through the narrow streets of Beacon Hill, scanning every corner where the light met the shadow. He stopped at shelters, diners and parks, where the cold wind carried the smell of damp blankets and burnt coffee. Some recognized the description he gave a girl about 7 dark, hair-brown coat holding her brother's hand, but no one knew where they slept. At the women's shelter on Tremont Street, a volunteer named Mrs. Ramirez looked up from sorting donated coats when Ethan showed her the note. Her kind face softened. "That handwriting," she said. "It's careful, like she was scared to make a mistake." She told him that sometimes children like that avoided official shelters. They feared being taken from each other by social services. If she's protecting her brother, Mrs. Ramirez said she'll hide anywhere the world doesn't look. The thought cut through Ethan like a knife. He thanked her, left a donation that could feed the shelter for a month, and kept walking into the gray afternoon. Boston's elegance faded block by block into quiet desperation. Graffiti walls rusted, fire escapes, and the hum of traffic beneath overpasses where forgotten people tried to stay warm. Hours passed. His shoes were soaked through his expensive coat streaked with salt and rain. He stopped at a bus station where a man selling coffee from a thermos pointed toward the river. "There's a family or two that sleeps under the bridge some nights," the man said. "Little ones sometimes. You might check there." By the time Ethan reached the edge of the Charles River, night had fallen. The city lights shimmered in the black water like broken glass. He stood there, the freezing wind stinging his face, and for the first time since he could remember, he prayed, quietly, awkwardly, to find 2 children who owed him nothing. Over the next few days he returned again and again. He carried food blankets and questions, showing the note to anyone who would listen. Most looked away. A few pointed him toward other streets, other corners, other bridges. The more he searched, the more the city began to change in his eyes. The people he once passed without seeing now had names, stories, and faces. He met a veteran who slept in a cardboard box but still gave half his sandwich to a stray dog. He met a teenage mother holding her baby under the fluorescent light of a subway station. Each encounter peeled away another layer of his old life, the one built on indifference and noise. One night, exhausted, Ethan sat on a park bench near Government Center holding the note under a flickering street lamp. The paper had softened at the folds, but the words still glowed like a living thing. He realized then that he wasn't just looking for Ella and Sam. He was looking for himself, for the man he might have been if greed and glory hadn't hardened him. On the 4th day, he stopped by Hale's bakery again. Mr. Hale looked worried. Still no sign, he asked. Ethan shook his head. If they come back, the baker said, I'll make sure they're fed no charge. But you might not find them easily. Kids like that, they move when the cold gets bad. Ethan nodded, slipping a thick envelope into the tip jar. Then, make sure no one goes hungry, he said quietly. That night, the wind howled across the Charles, pushing dry snow through the empty streets. Ethan wandered past the bridge again, scanning the darkness. A woman in a red knit hat called out from under an overpass. You look lost, she said. Aren't we all? He replied. She laughed softly, then pointed toward the end of the bridge. There's a girl and a boy who sometimes sleep near the old bus shelter by the river. Haven't seen them tonight, but maybe tomorrow. Ethan thanked her, pressed a folded bill into her hand, and kept walking. His breath clouded in the freezing air. Every instinct told him he was close, but the night swallowed all sound. When he finally stopped, he sat on the cold stone ledge, staring at the skyline glowing across the water. Somewhere in that city, 2 children were fighting to stay warm, and he was the only man who cared. He reached into his coat, unfolded the note once more, and read it aloud into the wind. I'm sorry. My brother was hungry. I took 1 bill to buy bread. His voice cracked. I promise I'll pay you back someday. He closed his eyes, whispering, You already did. As the snow began to fall harder, Ethan rose and turned toward the dark path ahead. He didn't know where it led, but he knew he couldn't stop now. Somewhere beyond the shadows, 2 small hearts were waiting, and he was finally ready to be worthy of finding them. The storm rolled in without warning that night, sweeping across Boston like a punishment the city hadn't earned. The wind screamed under Longfellow Bridge, scattering scraps of paper and leaves across the frozen ground. Ethan Ward's coat clung to his shoulders, soaked through as he walked along the edge of the river, with a flashlight trembling in his hand. His driver had begged him to turn back hours earlier, but Ethan couldn't. He'd searched for nearly a week, and something deep inside told him he was close. As he crossed beneath the bridge, the beam of his flashlight cut through the rain, and there tucked beneath a broken concrete pillar were 2 small shapes pressed together beneath a torn blanket. His heart slammed against his ribs. He stepped forward slowly, the crunch of gravel echoing louder than he expected. The older child stirred, then sat up, shielding the smaller one with her body. Who's there? She called, her voice trembling but fierce. Ethan froze. It's okay, he said softly. My name's Ethan. I'm not here to hurt you. The girl squinted through the dim light. She looked thinner than he remembered from Mr. Hale's description, her cheeks hollow, her dark hair matted from the rain. You're lying, she whispered. People say that before they take you away. He took another step, lowering the flashlight to the ground. "I'm just here to help," he said. "You left me a note once, didn't you?" Her eyes widened. The boy beside her coughed violently, and the sound tore through the silence. Ethan knelt a few feet away, careful not to frighten them. "That's your brother, right?" Sam Ella nodded slowly, one arm wrapped around the boy. "He's sick. Don't call anyone, please. They'll take us apart." Ethan shook his head. "No one's taking you anywhere, but he needs a doctor." Rain pelted the pavement around them. Ethan unbuttoned his coat and draped it over the two children. Sam's skin burned hot beneath his small, trembling hand. "I have a car just up the hill," Ethan said. "Let me take you somewhere safe. You can rest, both of you." Ella's chin lifted stubbornly. "If you're lying, I'll run." He met her gaze. "Then I'll run with you," he said quietly. The words hung there, fragile and real. Something in her expression shifted, fear giving way to the faintest thread of trust. She nodded once. Ethan scooped Sam into his arms. The boy's head lolled against his shoulder, fever radiating through the thin blanket. Ella followed close behind, clutching the edge of his coat as if afraid the moment she let go, he would disappear. They climbed the slick stone steps, the city lights flickering above them like distant stars. Inside the car, Ethan turned the heat to full blast. "Hold on, buddy," he whispered as he drove, weaving through the nearly empty streets. He called Dr. Patel, a friend who owed him a favor. "I need a pediatrician tonight," he said urgently. "No questions, just help." At the small private clinic, nurses rushed to take Sam inside. Ella refused to let go of her brother's hand until Ethan promised he'd stay beside them both. They watched from the hallway as doctors worked quickly oxygen mask V fluids, fever reducer. The minutes dragged like hours. When Dr. Patel finally stepped out, his face softened. "He's stable," he said. "Severe pneumonia, but you brought him in just in time." He glanced at Ethan, then at Ella, sitting motionless on the waiting bench. "She's been taking care of him, hasn't she?" Ethan nodded. "Looks like it." The doctor sighed. "Most kids in her situation don't last long out there. You might have saved 2 lives tonight." Ethan looked at the sleeping boy through the glass and whispered, "No, they saved mine." Later, as the storm calmed outside, the clinic's hum of machines filled the silence. Ella sat beside her brother's bed, clutching his hand. Ethan brought her a cup of hot chocolate from the vending machine. She took it politely but didn't drink right away. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. He sat down beside her. "Because you helped me first." She frowned, not understanding. Ethan pulled the note from his wallet, unfolded it carefully. "You wrote this." "I read it, and it changed everything." Ella's eyes dropped to the paper. "I didn't think you'd ever see it," she said quietly. "I did," Ethan replied, "and I'll never forget it." For a long moment the two sat in silence, broken only by the rhythmic beep of Sam's heart monitor. Then Ella whispered, "You won't tell anyone where we are, right?" "No," Ethan said. "You're safe. You can stay here tonight." By morning, the snow outside had stopped. Pale light spilled through the blinds, softening the sterile edges of the room. Sam slept soundly for the first time in days. Ella had dozed off in a chair beside him, her small hands curled beneath her chin. Ethan stood by the window, watching the city wake. When Dr. Patel came in with discharge papers, Ethan gestured for silence. "Let them rest," he said. "They'll stay with me for a while." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" Ethan nodded. "I have more room than I'll ever need, and they don't have anyone else." That evening, after Sam was released, Ethan drove them to his penthouse. The elevator doors opened to a space that looked more like a museum than a home glass chrome silence. Ella stepped inside cautiously, her shoes squeaking on the polished floor. "You can stay here until he's better," Ethan said gently. "No one will bother you." She stared at the sweeping view of the harbor, her voice barely a whisper. "You live here alone." "Not anymore," he said. That night, he made grilled cheese sandwiches, burned the first batch, laughed at himself, and tried again. Ella smiled for the first time, a small flicker of warmth breaking through the shell of fear. Sam, still weak, ate slowly, his eyes brightening as he looked around the apartment, filled with soft light and quiet music. When the children finally fell asleep on the couch beneath a mountain of blankets, Ethan sat in the armchair across from them, unable to look away. The city glowed through the glass behind him, but his gaze stayed on the two small lives he had somehow stumbled upon. For years, Ethan Ward had measured worth in numbers, profits, properties, stocks. But that night, in the quiet hum of his living room, he learned the simplest truth of all. Sometimes the smallest hearts carry the greatest courage. And for the first time in a decade, the billionaire who once felt nothing whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for a note, a storm, and two children who had shown him what it meant to be human. The weeks that followed felt like a fragile kind of peace. Sam's fever faded, laughter slowly replaced coughing, and the penthouse that once echoed with silence now carried the sound of crayons scratching across paper and the hum of cartoons on the living room TV. Ella learned how to make pancakes with Ethan, standing on a stool by the counter, her hair tied in a messy braid. Every morning she'd ask the same question, "Are we going to stay here forever?" And every morning Ethan would smile and answer, "For as long as you need." He meant it. But forever, as he would soon learn, rarely lasts as long as it should. It began with a phone call from a private investigator Ethan had quietly hired weeks earlier. "I think I found something," the man said. Or rather, someone. Ethan felt the world tilt. The investigator told him about a man named Daniel Grace Ella, and Sam's father recently released from a correctional facility in Worcester County. The file said Daniel had served time for breaking into a pharmacy. His wife had died before the trial. He'd lost custody of both children and had been searching for them since the day he walked free. Ethan didn't know what to feel. Part of him was relieved, at least the children weren't truly alone. But another part clenched with fear. The thought of losing them felt unbearable. He sat for hours in the dark, the city glittering below, the sound of the children's laughter from the next room tightening his chest. When Ella crept in to say goodnight, her small hand touched his arm, and he knew he couldn't keep the truth from her forever. The next morning, Daniel Grace walked into a social services office with a folder of documents and a trembling voice. He told them about his children, how he'd written to every shelter, called every church bulletin, even searched the cold streets of Boston, hoping to find them. The system listened but moved slowly, until that week when his name finally crossed paths with Ethan Ward's. The state scheduled a meeting. The call came to Ethan's assistant first, who nearly dropped the phone. "They want to discuss guardianship," she said. Ethan didn't argue. He knew this day was coming. At the courthouse, the fluorescent lights felt too bright, the air too heavy. Ella sat beside him, clutching his hand. Sam swung his legs nervously. Across the room sat Daniel Grace. Tired eyes, worn hands, a cheap suit that didn't fit. The moment Ella saw him, her grip on Ethan's hand loosened. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Daniel's voice cracked as he spoke. "Ella, Sam, I'm so sorry. I never meant to leave you. I thought I could fix everything." Ella looked down at her lap. "Mom got sick," she whispered. "You weren't there." Tears streamed down Daniel's face. "I know," he said. "I was trying to get medicine for her. That's why I—" He stopped, the shame too heavy to finish. Ethan wanted to hate him, wanted to blame him for every tear, every cold night those children had endured. But as he watched Daniel struggle to hold himself together, Ethan saw something painfully familiar, the face of a man who'd made mistakes trying to protect what he loved. When the judge entered the room, settled into silence. The guardian from social services outlined the facts. Ethan had provided a stable environment, medical care, and emotional support. Daniel had served his sentence and was attempting to rebuild his life. Both men were deemed fit in different ways. The question the judge said, adjusting her glasses, is not who loves these children more, but what serves their best interest. Daniel stood and addressed the court. Mr. Ward gave my kids what I couldn't: safety, warmth, a future. I can't undo my past, but I'll spend the rest of my life earning back their trust. Ethan rose slowly. His voice was calm but raw. They saved me, he said simply. Before I met Ella and Sam, I had everything money could buy and none of it mattered. I can't imagine a life without them now. But they deserve the chance to know their father. The judge studied both men for a long moment, then spoke with measured care. Mr. Ward, your guardianship is extended for 6 months. Mr. Grace, you will be granted supervised visitation rights during that time. The court expects full cooperation from both of you. It wasn't victory or defeat, it was something fragile in between. Ella turned to Ethan, tears glistening on her cheeks. Does that mean we have to leave? She whispered. He shook his head. Not yet, he said softly. We'll figure this out together. After the hearing, Daniel approached him outside the courthouse steps. I don't know how to thank you, he said quietly. You could have kept them hidden, but you didn't. Ethan looked at him for a long moment before answering. They're not mine to hide, he said. You get one chance to make it right. Don't waste it. Daniel nodded, his voice breaking. I won't. In the weeks that followed, they built a careful rhythm: visits at the park, on Saturdays phone calls, on weeknights long talks about what the kids liked to eat, how Sam's reading was improving, how Ella had started painting sunsets again. Ethan and Daniel learned to share something rare and delicate: responsibility without resentment. One evening, as the sun set over the harbor, Ella stood between them, her small hands holding theirs. Can we all just be family? She asked. Neither man answered right away. They just nodded, each realizing that maybe for the first time, that word meant something deeper than blood. That night, when Ethan tucked the kids into bed, he lingered a little longer. In the quiet, he whispered to himself, sometimes doing the right thing doesn't mean holding on, it means letting go just enough for everyone to heal. And for the first time, he didn't feel like he was losing them. He felt like he was finally learning what love really meant. Spring arrived in Boston quietly that year, slipping in with pale skies and the first scent of rain on warm pavement. For the first time in months, Ethan Ward woke to the sound of laughter instead of silence. Sam was in the living room building a tower of cereal boxes, while Ella sat cross-legged by the window painting the harbor at sunrise. The apartment that once felt like a museum had turned into a home, one filled with mismatched coffee mugs, school drawings taped to the fridge, and the kind of noise that money could never buy. 6 months had passed since the judge's ruling. Daniel Grace had kept every promise: steady work, sobriety, and quiet persistence. He never missed a visit. Sometimes he came to watch Ella's school play or cheer for Sam at Little League practice. There were moments when Ethan still caught the old fear in Ella's eyes, the question she didn't ask out loud, will everything fall apart again? But over time, the answer became clear in the simplest ways. Daniel's steady presence, Ethan's unchanging care, and the children's growing laughter. That morning, Ethan took them all to the park by the Charles River, where the cherry trees had just started to bloom. Daniel arrived carrying a small box of pastries from a bakery near his new apartment. It wasn't fancy, but the pride in his A's spoke volumes. Got the job promotion, he told Ethan quietly. Full-time mechanic now. Health insurance, steady hours. Feels good to stand on my own 2 feet again." Ethan smiled the kind of smile that carried no envy, only gratitude. "You earned it," he said. "You've done what a lot of men wouldn't have had the courage to do, rebuild from the ground up." Daniel nodded, glancing toward Ella and Sam, who were chasing pigeons near the fountain. "They're my reason," he said simply. "They kept me alive when I didn't think I deserved another chance." Ethan watched him for a moment, then turned back to the children. "You're not alone in that," he said softly. Later that afternoon, they all sat on a bench overlooking the water, sharing the last of the pastries. Sam, his cheeks dusted with powdered sugar, leaned against Ethan's shoulder. "Are we still a family?" he asked through a mouthful of croissant. Ethan looked at Daniel, then back at the boy. "Of course we are," he said. "Families aren't about where you live or what your last name is. They're about who shows up, and both your dads are here." The word dads hung in the air for a moment, but neither man corrected him. Daniel's eyes glistened, and Ethan's chest ached in a way that felt both painful and healing. As the sun began to dip, Ethan pulled out the old note, the one Ella had written months before in trembling handwriting. "I'm sorry. My brother was hungry. I took 1 bill to buy bread. I promise I'll pay you back." He handed it to her. "Do you remember this?" Ella smiled shyly. "I thought you'd thrown it away." "Never," he said. "It reminded me what honesty looks like when the world's forgotten it. But you don't owe me anything anymore, Ella. You already paid me back more than you'll ever know." She looked down at the paper, tracing the faded creases. "Can I keep it?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "It's yours." It always was. That evening, Daniel drove the kids home to his small apartment for their weekend stay. The building wasn't much an old brick walk-up with peeling paint, but through the open window came the smell of something cooking and the sound of a neighbor's radio playing Sinatra. The children ran ahead already at ease in the new rhythm of their lives. Before leaving, Ethan stood with Daniel in the doorway. "You did it," he said quietly. "They're happy. That's all I ever wanted." Daniel looked at him, gratitude shining in his eyes. "You could have made this a fight," he said, "but instead you made it a family. I'll never forget that." Ethan shook his head. "Just keep showing up, Daniel. That's all they need." On the drive back to his penthouse, the city lights shimmered against the windshield, but the view no longer carried the same emptiness. He thought of the children's laughter, the way Ella had started humming while she painted the sound of Sam's small voice, asking if they were still a family. The loneliness that once defined him had been replaced with something far more enduring: connection. Weeks later, a letter arrived from the courthouse. The guardianship review had concluded. The judge commended both men for their cooperation and noted that the children were thriving in a shared structure of care and affection. Ethan read the letter twice, then set it down beside the note that had started it all. He smiled, realizing how far they had come from a lost wallet on a wet street to a bond stronger than circumstance. That Sunday, the 4 of them gathered again at the park. Daniel brought a kite he'd bought for Sam. Ethan brought sandwiches. The wind was gentle, the sky endless. As the kite rose higher, Ella ran ahead, laughing her braid, catching the light. Daniel and Ethan stood side by side, watching the string stretch into the blue. "You ever think about how one small act can change everything?" Ethan asked quietly. Daniel chuckled. "Every day." They stood there for a long moment, 2 men bound not by blood, but by a shared promise to give these children a future better than their past. When the sun began to fade, Ella and Sam came running back, breathless and glowing. "We made it touch the clouds," Sam shouted. Ethan knelt down and smiled. Then, "Keep flying it, buddy. That's what life's about, holding onto the string even when the wind changes." As the city lights flickered to life across the water, Ethan realized something profound. The fortune he once thought defined him had never truly mattered. What did matter was this: a family born from chance, a second chance born from compassion, and a promise that tomorrow, no matter what came, they would face it together. In the end, what began as a simple story about a lost wallet became a journey that transformed 3 lives forever. Ethan Ward, once a man defined by his fortune and his loneliness, found meaning in the most unexpected way through the trembling handwriting of a little girl who had nothing but honesty and hope. That note, "I took 1 bill to buy bread for my brother. I promise I'll pay you back," didn't just reveal Ella's character. It exposed the emptiness in Ethan's own life. For the first time, the billionaire who owned half of Boston realized he was the one truly poor in love, poor in connection, poor in purpose. His search for the children wasn't just about returning a wallet. It was about finding what money could never buy: humanity. Every cold street he walked, every stranger he spoke to, stripped away another layer of pride until all that was left was a man desperate to do something good. And when he finally found Ella and Sam huddled beneath that bridge, he didn't just rescue 2 children from the cold. He rescued himself from the emptiness he had been living in for years. Bringing them into his home was supposed to be temporary, but love has a way of rewriting every plan. The sound of laughter in his penthouse, the warmth of small hands holding his, and the gentle trust in Ella's eyes began to heal wounds Ethan didn't know he had. For the first time, his mornings weren't driven by meetings or money, but by pancakes, drawings, and bedtime stories. He discovered that real wealth wasn't measured in stocks or numbers. It was measured in moments that filled the soul. Then came Daniel Grace, the father who had lost everything but hope. His return could have torn that fragile piece apart, but instead it tested the true strength of everyone's character. Ethan could have fought for custody, clung to what he'd built, but he chose compassion over control. He chose to share love instead of possess it. And in that act of humility, 2 men who came from opposite worlds found common ground: the shared desire to give 2 children the future they deserved. In the end, they didn't just rebuild a family, they redefined it. Ethan, Daniel, Ella, and Sam became proof that family isn't about bloodlines or wealth. It's about the people who stay, who care, and who choose each other even when life gets complicated. What began with guilt and chance became a testament to second chances and the healing power of love. The message of their story is simple but powerful. No act of kindness is ever too small to change a life. That note, written by a hungry child, set off a chain of grace that touched every person it reached. In our modern world, where people often look away from suffering, this story reminds us that empathy still matters, that generosity still saves, and that redemption can begin with one honest choice. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: kindness is not weakness, compassion is not naive, and helping one person may just be the thing that helps you find yourself. If this story moved your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories like this, stories that remind us of who we are and who we can still become. Share this video, leave a comment about what part touched you the most, and help us continue spreading hope, compassion, and faith in humanity, one story at a time.